So we got another firmware release for the Legends Ultimate, as we do every single week. Now this one is not heavy, there isn't major features going on here, but what I've decided to do is bundle this video with a tutorial to show you guys how to get TurboGrafx-16 CD games running on your Legends Ultimate. This is Steve from Restalgia, and let's get started. So we're gonna go ahead and just blast through the firmware release. Now there aren't a ton of new features here, but there are a couple notable ones, so we will touch base on that. One of the best ones, in my personal opinion, one that people have been screaming for since the release of this cabinet, is the ability to quickly scroll through all those long text boxes like your privacy policy or any of the new release notes that we are now forced to scroll through after every update. So they've now enabled an auto-scrolling feature. All you have to do is hold down on your joystick, and that's actually going to scroll right on through, and you don't have to keep clicking. It just goes through nice and quickly. Now the other new features that we've got aren't really new features for my channel. I had touched base about them last week, but they were delayed, so we're going to see some of them coming up this week. The first one to talk about is the leaderboard games. In my previous video, I had said there was going to be 5 new leaderboard games, but they were delayed. This week, we should see 3 new titles. We're going to see Black Widow, Side Pocket, and Super Real Darwin. So those are some nice games to be able to add to the leaderboard feature. A lot of people love that, myself included. It's just a really fun way to compete with the rest of the community. Additionally, the other feature that I'd mentioned was that you could have multi-entry behavior, so you could have up to 5 different entries on any of the leaderboard games. Now, I believe that that was not functioning as of last week, even though it was supposed to be, and it's been delayed up until this week. So what that means, if you didn't catch last week's video, you can actually submit more than one high score for a specific title. You just have to set the submission initials differently. But that's actually pretty handy, because if you do have more than one person in the house playing the cabinet, you now have flexibility to not only have one individual's high score submitted. But that's more or less it. There's not really much else to talk about in terms of the firmware update. Let's go ahead and talk about getting TurboGrafx-16 and PC Engine CD games up and running. Now, I am going to mention, if you watched my Sega CD tutorial from last week, the process is incredibly similar. What we're going to need to do first and foremost is go to a website and download the latest core for the PC Engine. Now, I'm going to leave a direct link in the description down below, and this, of course, was created by the one and only Wildcoder. Another thing that I do want to mention is hop on down to the description. I will leave a link to his YouTube channel. Please visit his channel, subscribe to him, and give him some support. He's been doing incredible work, and he often posts videos of some of the projects he's working on, so you guys will have a heads up as to what to expect. Definitely go down, subscribe to his channel. The next thing that we're going to need is a BIOS file. Now, I've got the BIOS file right over here, and this is exactly the one that you're going to need. I cannot point you towards where you can find it. I have to leave that in your hands, but this file name specifically, syscard3.pce, is the BIOS file that you need in order for PC Engine CD and TurboGrafx CD games to run. They will not run without it, so keep that in mind. Next, I've got a TurboGrafx-16 bezel. And this is one that I just picked up online. I just did a Google search for TurboGrafx-16 RetroArch bezels. It came up, and I resized it so it fits on the Legends Ultimate Arcade cabinet. And then the last things that we need are some artwork for the games, and of course the games themselves. Now, the games that I decided to do are going to be Dracula X, because that is one of my favorite games on the PC Engine or TurboGrafx. I've got Lords of Thunder here, and for Glenn over at Glenn's Retro Show, I made sure to include E's Book 1 and 2 because I know it's his favorite.
And this is a fantastic game. E's Book 1 and 2 is a fantastic game.
So with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and get this thing loaded up. Now, if you've watched the Sega CD video and you've actually started to implement that process, you'll have some of these folders already created. If not, you're going to need to create a content folder on the root of your USB drive. And once that's done, we're going to double click on it, and inside you're going to create a couple more folders if you don't already have them. The first one is going to be labeled BIOS, B-I-O-S. We're going to double click on that, and we're going to drag and drop our BIOS file into this folder. Once it's in there, we no longer need to mess around in there. What we do want to do though is go back to our content section, and we're gonna need to go into the consoles folder. If you do not have this folder, you'll need to create a folder, and you've got to label it consoles exactly how I have it spelt here. So we're gonna go in there, and as you can see, I've got my Sega CD games in there, but we need to create a new folder, and this is very important. It has to be labeled very specifically. It needs to be labeled NEC space dash PC, all caps, space, capital E, engine, space, and then capital C and D again. Very important because the instructions tell it to look specifically for this folder. So if you don't have it, you're not going to get this thing up and running properly. Once that's done, we're going to jump on into it. And all that we really need to do is grab our games and drag and drop them in. But before we do that, we need to make sure of a few things. I'm going to pull up Lords of Thunder to use it as an example. As you can see, Lords of Thunder has USA in brackets. Now you can leave that there. I don't want it there. I'm going to remove it. So the folder itself is just going to be called Lords of Thunder. The other thing that you're going to need to do when you open it up is make sure that your Q file is exactly labeled the same way as the folder is. It has to have the exact same name. You don't have to mess around with the bin files, but the Q file must match the folder name. So we're gonna go ahead and get rid of the USA in brackets on this as well, and then we are good to go. All that's left for us to do is to drag this folder into our folder that we created on our USB drive. So I'm going to go ahead and transfer that over. And it's important to note that you're going to have to do the same with any of the other games that you've got, as well as keeping in mind you don't want to have your title of your folder or of the Q file to be longer than about 40 characters. Otherwise, it's also not going to work. Now I'm going to go ahead and skip over this process while I get the other two folders loaded into the USB drive, and I'll be back in just a quick second. So I've got those games now loaded up onto the USB drive, and I do want to mention it's also important that you don't want to have very many special characters. For example, the E's book 1 and 2 actually had an ampersand. We can't have that in there. We did need to remove it and replace it with the word and. Dashes, on the other hand, should be fine, and they are readable. So we're going to go ahead and leave that the way it is. And now we've got our BIOS loaded up onto the USB drive, and we've got our PC Engine CD games loaded up onto our USB drive in the correct directories. What's really left for us to do is to create those UCE files. So we're going to go ahead and grab our add-on tool and start working with that. So I've got it right over here. We're going to double click to open it up. And what we want to do is first load up our emulation core or our emulator core, and that's going to be right on our desktop. I just need to locate it. It's right over here, this PC Engine _fast. We're going to grab that. Next, what we want to do is grab our bezel art, and again, that's also going to be on the desktop. And then we want to choose our ROM. So for that, we're going to go ahead and choose File. We're going to navigate to our USB drive, and we are going to go into our content folder, and then into consoles, and then into PC Engine CD, and then we're going to select a title. In this case, I'm going to choose Dracula X. I'm going to grab that, and we want to only select the Q file. Now, you're not going to see the Q file by default. What you need to do is change the general ROM file extension to any file. Once we do that, we'll be able to see our Q file. We just have to select it and hit open. And as you can see, the game title will automatically change. All that's left for us to do is grab some box art, which I've got on my desktop right over in my artwork folder. Here it is. And that's pretty much it. Now we just got to build the package. Now we are going to save this package directly onto our USB drive, and on the root of our drive, we need to create a new folder, and we're going to go ahead and label this TurboGrafx-16. Now it doesn't really matter what you label this because it's just going to be used as the directory once we go into the add-on tool on the actual cabinet. You can label it PC Engine CD, you can label it NEC. It doesn't really matter what you label it at this point. We're going to go in there and we're just going to go ahead and save the UCE into this folder. It's going to build the package and it won't take very long. As you can see, it's already finished. And then we just have to rinse and repeat for the other games. So I'm just going to do that really quick and jump forward. Okay, so now we've got all of our games created. Our UCE files are all in the proper location. BIOS is loaded up. Games are in the correct folder. All we got to do now is grab our USB, pop it into our Legends Ultimate, and test these games out. So let's go ahead and switch over to the cabinet. Okay, so once we are on our cabinet, we just need to have our USB drive plugged in, and we need to make our way over to the BYOG section and wait for our add-ons tool to pop up. Once it's there, we can go ahead and click on it, and it's going to bring us to our USB, which will have all of our games built into it. Now, as you can see on the left-hand side, we do have our TurboGrafx CD folder, and once we click on that, you're going to see the 3 titles that we loaded up: Lords of Thunder, Easebook 1 and 2, and Dracula X. Now, I'm not going to do very much talking. Everything's pre-mapped and ready to go. I'm just going to show you guys a little bit of footage of these games. And that's pretty much all I've got for you guys. Thank you so very much for watching. I want to give another huge, massive shout out to Wildcoder. He's doing some awesome work and he's really contributing to the community. So thank you so very much for doing that. Please, guys, go to the description and subscribe to his channel. It is well worth it. But that's all I've got for you. Thank you so very much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys again real soon.